The dollar's grip on the world is slipping, and the shock isn't coming from China or Russia this time. It's coming from one of America's oldest friends. Australia, a global mining powerhouse and US ally, is quietly moving toward Beijing's side. While Washington tries to hold the system together with tariffs and sanctions, China is building a new trading world, one deal at a time. And now, the biggest shift yet is happening in the iron ore market, where hundreds of millions of tons move every month and China controls nearly 3/4 of global demand. This isn't just trade anymore, it's leverage. Beijing knows every ship that sails carries the power to shape prices, rewrite contracts, and push the world closer to its own currency. China's demand for iron ore is unlike anything the world has ever seen. Every single month, Chinese factories and steel mills consume over 100 million tons of it. That's about 75% of all global imports. No other buyer comes close. This gives Beijing an enormous advantage. If China slows down purchases, prices collapse overnight. If it ramps up imports, markets surge and miners around the world celebrate. That kind of power doesn't just move commodities, it shapes entire economies. Countries like Australia and Brazil rely heavily on this trade. Their budgets, jobs, and export revenues depend on the steady flow of Chinese demand, and Beijing knows it. When one customer controls 3/4 of the market, that customer can set the rules. For years, the US played the same game through the dollar, forcing nations to follow its financial system or risk isolation. Now China is doing something similar through trade. It's using iron ore as its testing ground for a bigger idea, shifting global commerce into its own currency. By promoting settlements in the Chinese yuan, Beijing turns basic trade into strategy. Each shipment paid in yuan reduces the need for dollars, builds up offshore liquidity, and pushes the Chinese currency deeper into the global system. This isn't confrontation by force, it's influence through demand. If suppliers want access to China's huge market, they must adapt to its new financial language. For Australia, this is an uncomfortable but unavoidable reality. Iron ore is the backbone of its export economy, and nearly all of it goes to China. Losing that relationship would be devastating. So when Beijing hints at using yuan for payments, companies listen carefully. What started as a quiet experiment has become a landmark moment, the beginning of currency diversification in one of the world's largest raw material industries. And for China, it's only the start of a broader plan to anchor global trade around its own money, one contract at a time. This new agreement between China and Australia marks a turning point in global trade. BHP Billiton, Australia's largest company and one of the world's biggest iron ore exporters, has agreed to settle 30% of its iron ore sales to China in Chinese RMB. The deal is worth around $10 billion and covers nearly 90 million tons of ore, enough to supply China's steel industry for an entire month. For decades, these payments were made in US dollars. Now, that money will move directly in yuan, bypassing the dollar altogether. For China, this move is brilliant strategy. By securing a critical resource in its own currency, Beijing eliminates exchange risk and strengthens the yuan's international reach. Each ton of ore paid for in RMB reduces the need for dollar reserves and reinforces the idea that trade can function outside the US financial network. The more China imports in yuan, the greater the global demand for its currency. For Australia, the decision is both practical and symbolic. China is its largest customer by far, buying the bulk of its exports. When such a customer asks to pay in yuan, it's hard to say no. And once BHP accepts RMB, others will follow. The iron ore market is enormous, and if even a fraction of global trade shifts to yuan, it opens the door for other commodities, copper, lithium, and even LNG, to follow the same path. Beijing understands leverage better than anyone. It's not forcing countries to switch, it's making the choice profitable. With stable exchange rates and faster settlements, using RMB simply makes business sense. And for Australia, the yuan it earns will likely return to China through new investments, creating a closed economic loop that strengthens both sides and leaves the dollar on the sidelines. The closer China draws Australia into its orbit, the stronger this wave of de-dollarization becomes. And no one feels that pressure more than Besant and Trump. You can almost see how concerned Besant looks about the handshake between Albanese and Xi. It's the look of a man watching the dollar's power slip away. What looks like a single trade agreement is, in reality, a financial experiment with global consequences. China is giving countries their own brand of casino chips, valuable only inside its expanding economic system. And as more nations begin to play with those chips, the center of gravity in global trade slowly tilts eastward. China's influence over Australia is deepening, and this time, it's through finance. Fortescue Metals Group, one of the world's biggest iron ore miners, has just secured a 14 billion yuan RMB loan worth about $2 billion. The deal was arranged by ICBC and the Bank of China, two of Beijing's largest state lenders. What makes it remarkable is how generous the terms are. The debt is unsecured, meaning Fortescue didn't have to pledge its assets as collateral, and the funds come with no spending restrictions. Even more striking is the fixed interest rate, only 3.8% per year. If Fortescue tried to borrow the same amount in US dollars, the rate would easily reach 5 to 6%, since American loans are pegged to the US Treasury yield, which in August stood near 4%. That difference adds up to tens of millions in savings each year. China is deliberately making its money cheaper and easier to access. It's offering what the dollar no longer provides: stability and low cost. The funds will support Fortescue's green energy expansion, a cornerstone of Australia's transition to cleaner industries. And that fits perfectly into Beijing's long-term play. China gains not just an economic partner, but also a market for its renewable technologies and heavy equipment. While Washington clings to fossil fuel politics and Trump dismisses renewables as a passing trend, Beijing is quietly financing the next phase of industrial growth in its own currency. This is how economic power shifts, not through speeches or sanctions, but through credit. Each yuan loan extended abroad deepens reliance on Chinese banks and makes the yuan a little more global. Beijing isn't just buying Australia's resources anymore, it's underwriting its future. Beijing's strategy goes beyond trade and finance. It's about reshaping entire industries. Before securing the 14 billion yen loan, Fortescue Metals Group had already signed a $400 million contract with Chinese manufacturer XCMG to supply zero-emission mining equipment. These are not ordinary machines. They are electric haul trucks, loaders, and cranes built with Chinese components, software, and battery systems. Each shipment replaces equipment that once came from American or European suppliers. By tying loans to technology exports, China is effectively vendor financing Australia's transition toward clean energy. The new RMB funding guarantees that future contracts, spare parts, and servicing will stay inside China's industrial network. It's a closed-loop system. Chinese banks provide the money, Chinese firms deliver the products, and Chinese demand keeps the cycle alive. For Australia, the result is cheaper and faster modernization. For Beijing, it's the creation of long-term dependence, achieved not through pressure, but through opportunity. While US policymakers debate tariffs and fossil fuels, Chinese companies are building the machines that will define the next industrial age. Their equipment is affordable, scalable, and already available at massive volume. America's high borrowing costs and political resistance to green projects have left the field open. Each new deal paid in yuan strengthens China's export engine and erodes the dollar's reach. Every yuan loan it issues, every Chinese machine that rolls into a foreign mine, makes the global economy a little less American. South Korea has mastered the art of balance in a world pulled between Washington and Beijing. When President Lee Jae-myung met Xi Jinping, the exchange of gifts told the story better than any speech. Seoul offered a Go board, the ancient Chinese strategy game, a quiet nod to China's long view of power and Korea's understanding of the new game shaping Asia. That lighthearted exchange, Xi joking about a back door while handing over Chinese smartphones, shows how Beijing mixes humor with symbolism. It's not just about gifts, It's about reminding partners that Chinese technology and influence are everywhere, even in the devices they use. Officially, Korea remains a U.S. ally, but trade tells another story. Tariffs on Korean goods entering the U.S. have dropped from 25% to 15%. Yet business leaders know those numbers can change overnight. Trump's trade policy moves faster than markets can react, so Seoul is rebuilding bridges with Beijing to protect its industries. Dependence on China is already clear. Imports from the mainland have surged, while exports have stagnated. Automakers are losing ground to local Chinese brands, and even in semiconductors, Korea's strongest sector, the gap is narrowing as China expands production. For Seoul, survival means cooperation. The more the U.S. turns trade into a political weapon, the more Asian economies will seek stability elsewhere, and China is ready to offer it. Trump's latest sanctions target Russia's biggest oil producers, Rosneft and Lukoil, aiming to choke Moscow's energy revenue and pressure its allies to stop buying. But the plan is already unraveling. China and India keep importing Russian crude, keeping supply lines open despite U.S. threats. Russian oil trades $8 to $12 cheaper than Brent, a discount no economy can overlook in today's inflationary world. Instead of isolating Russia, the sanctions have lifted global prices, up 10% since the measures began, hurting consumers everywhere, including in the U.S. For India, Russian crude now provides over 30% of total imports and anchors its energy security. Replacing it with costlier U.S. or Middle Eastern barrels would push inflation higher. Reuters reports Indian refiners still buying cargoes for December delivery, using non-sanctioned intermediaries and the same shadow fleets Russia has relied on since 2022. Meanwhile, in August, U.S. oil production surged to an all-time high of 13.8 million barrels a day. Washington wants to export that surplus, and curbing Russian sales is one way to create demand. Yet the strategy is backfiring. Brics nations are rerouting trade and proving that Washington no longer controls the world's energy flow. The global map of power is changing in plain sight. One by one, America's partners are redrawing their economic ties, not with speeches, but with deals. Australia now trades part of its iron ore in RMB. Brazil and Russia already use local currencies, and India keeps buying discounted Russian oil despite sanctions. Across Asia, allies like South Korea are hedging their bets, quietly strengthening trade with Beijing while keeping one foot in Washington. Each move chips away at the dollar's dominance and makes the global economy more multipolar. For Trump and his advisors, this is the nightmare they hope to avoid. Allies turning competitors, and the dollar losing its gravitational pull. De-dollarization isn't a prediction anymore. It's unfolding trade by trade, handshake by handshake, as the world learns to operate without the greenback at the center. The dollar's era of dominance is fading faster than anyone expected. When allies start trading in yuan, how long before the dollar's crown finally slips? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe. See you in the next video.